Hello, Cathy. Thank you for coming onto the podcast. And it's really, really great to have you on talking about neurodiversity, something that we're obviously looking at together. Tell us a little bit about yourself and whereabouts you're working and what responsibilities you're taking on as a result.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm an associate professor at University of Birmingham in the School of Psychology. And so, along with all the teaching and things I do, I also do quite a lot of research into sensory processing. Typically, I've done quite a lot of research in autism, and so trying to better understand why autistic people process sensory information differently. But we're starting to think as well more broadly about why neurodivergent people more generally have differences in sensory processing.
Excellent. And you've done quite a bit of research already.
Yeah, yeah. I guess it's only more recently, though, that we've really been thinking about how the environment is important. So thinking about sensory environments, done quite a lot of research thinking about, the sensory processing characteristics of an individual and thinking maybe less about the space that someone's in and how the person and the environment fit together and how important that is.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that we've have started to think about a few years ago. I think we probably reached out to you for a little bit of thought around maybe 2021 or 2022, so 3 or 4 years ago now, and we was acutely aware that it's okay for us to design attractions and experiences and environments that we thought people would love. But if we're going on the very rudimentary figure that we know that 20% of the global population is neurodivergent in some way, shape, or form, that's 1 in 5 guests that we are actively not considering as much as we
Mm.
should do. Obviously, hence the reason of working with you and trying to find maybe not an immediate solution because these things are always going to be taking time and finding the right thing. And I guess as we come on to as well, we're not dealing with a one solution fits all, are we?
Mm. No, absolutely. And I think that is it, is trying to think about how can we sort of make things so that there's sort of adaptations that could be maybe used and flexibility because everyone's needs are obviously so different and we need to think about that.
Excellent. So it comes to that point of the podcast where we kind of unveil that we're going to be working together alongside Drayton Manor as well, theme park in the Midlands. And we're going to be looking at neurodiversity, in particular within the themed attractions, themed entertainment space. And this is a PhD research piece, isn't it, Cathy? Could you tell us a little bit more about what we're trying to do with this study?
Yeah. So actually, Hayley Green, who's the PhD student on this, has just started her PhD. So just getting to grips with what has already been done in this area and that kind of thing. So it's very exciting. So what the aim of this PhD is really is we've done some research about which public places autistic people find either disabling or enabling due to the sensory environment. And we've come up with a set of principles that might explain why some environments are more or less difficult than others. And so this PhD project is really kind of going to go further on that by really focusing specifically on the themed attraction industry, because we just don't have enough sort of industry specific guidance yet. I think from some of the other projects that we've been doing, things thinking about, say, supermarkets and theatre performances, often we try and think about how we can make it more sensory inclusive by reducing sensory input. And we're very aware that that might not be right for this industry, in that actually, the kind of the very big sensory input might be kind of part of the enjoyment of going. So Hayley, who's the new PhD student, has got lived experience of neurodivergence, which is going to mean, and also she's a big fan of themed attractions. So it's going to mean that she can kind of bring those really important insights. And we're going to look at, we're going to do a kind of large scale survey to try and understand from neurodivergent people about which sort of what parts of themed attractions are maybe kind of more challenging or what's maybe
Mm.
they really like. But also, just as importantly, we're going to also try and reach people who don't go to themed attractions at the moment to try and understand what would make them want to go. Like, can we make it more attractive? And then I guess it's, that's the idea, that we can bring more people in to the industry.
So, as part of the research, What are the other how are we gonna get this information? Is it just going to be sort of secondary research, or are we going to be delving a little bit deeper as part of
Yeah.
this?
Yeah, so in addition to the large scale survey of neurodivergent people, both those who don't and do go to themed attractions, we're also our partnership with Drayton Manor means that we can do some kind of more on the ground, in depth work, which is really exciting. So this might all change when we actually kind of get started and see what's really needed. But kind of initial ideas is that we might have some kind of people doing guided walks around the manner and just telling us as they go about what things they're finding difficult or what things they're finding really good about it. But we also want to make sure that the research is accessible to as many people as possible. So we'll kind of be allowing people to interact with the research in whatever way that they want to communicate. So that might be doing interviews with us. It might also be doing, written exchanges with us. So maybe just sort of sending us emails or kind of over chat. And we're also hoping to sort of think from children to adults as well. And then the aim is that we will then kind of work with you, Catapult and Drayton Manor in terms of like build using your expertise from the industry to kind of think about how we can develop guidance and to make sure that it really kind of resonates with the industry and is helpful.
Fantastic, and a really good point around getting the input from children as well. And
Mm,
actually, I was just thinking about, gosh, the sensitivities of wanting to understand the child, but not wanting all of the parents' opinion.
yeah,
But actually, the parents' opinion is just as valid and just as
yeah,
important
yeah,
as
yeah.
part of this study, isn't it? Because as anyone that has children, there is requirements and needs to make sure that you have a great day out. So their input is
Yeah,
going to be
and I
just
mean, the
as
parent
important.
probably won't take them if they've had an awful experience themselves. So, even if the child thinks that they've had a great time, the parent may not take them. So I think, yeah, there will probably be a bit of kind of both getting both perspectives there.
And I think if we all think about a theme park in our minds, the big thing certainly that comes to my mind is that overstimulation that you
Mm,
have. And you're right, a lot of people do go for that feeling, if you like, whether
mm,
it's incredibly fast coasters, whether it's really gorgeous smelling candy floss or cotton candy. These are the things that kind of resonate with us. But at the same time, it's probably a lot of issues around overlapping of noises, large crowds in tight spaces, bright lights, too strong a sense, maybe
mm,
temperature, maybe not
yeah,
in the UK, but the theme park's temperature could be an issue unless it's really cold.
yeah,
And then also things like, the unpredictability, especially if we're talking about maybe a walkthrough event or an experience that is guided by actors and actresses. There is
mm,
so much there that could trigger a negative response and therefore trigger that person maybe not to come back again. And
yeah,
that's as much as we want with this study to try and stop those moments of negativity, we also want to amp up all of those really big moments that for certain neurodivergent members of the community, they love the
yeah,
flashing light, bright
yeah.
lights, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where it is really important to think about this. It's not one size fits all because I think, we do often think about those kind of sort of overwhelmed responses to sensory input, like
Mm,
it just being too much. But also there's the kind of sensory seeking aspect where lots of autistic and other neurodivergent people might really kind of really seek out that sensory stimulation. So absolutely, it's not necessarily about reducing that in all cases, but also thinking about sort of having some to recover. So having quiet areas or clear routes of how you can get out of a certain area if you need
mm,
to. Also about making the staff more understanding who are working at the themed attractions so that they might maybe be able to spot signs that someone is struggling or, you know, be less misunderstood. We don't want them, autistic or neurodivergent people to feel judged for their sort of responses to a sensory environment either. So there's probably some work to be done there. But of
mm.
course, that is also the point of this PhD to really find out what would be the best things to do.
Fantastic. And from the some of the research that you've either been a part of or you've seen out in the field, I think you mentioned around the supermarket shopping
Mm,
as well. What What are the issues that you've found as part of those elements of research that you think is transferable issues into the themed entertainment
mm.
industry?
Do you mean kind of what the issues with the supermarkets themselves are, or the kind of
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. I mean, so definitely things like, some of the things I've already mentioned. I mean, the space is important. So if we're thinking about crowds, then that is obviously really challenging. But also the confined environment as well.
Mm,
So when we think about supermarkets, we're thinking about maybe aisles being very kind of narrow and towering, but you could also think that that could be in kind of queue spaces, like people feel
mm.
quite sort of closed in. And the predictability which you mentioned. So, you talked about it in themed attractions, but when we're thinking about supermarkets, it might be just the supermarket just suddenly changing their layout. Also thinking about that kind of feeling like you can't escape can be a problem for supermarkets, which I think also could be a problem when you're in a themed attraction if you don't necessarily know like the way to get out and find a quieter space to be able to
Mm.
recover.
And I guess something that we can't necessarily take control of a lot, and is other people.
Mm,
Guests. That's something that we see
yeah,
within theme parks anyway. If it isn't the cleanliness of toilets or how long people have had to queue to go on a coaster, it is the attitudes or behaviours of other
yeah.
guests that have spoiled the day for that person,
Mm,
regardless of whether they're neurodivergent or not. So
mm.
um, that that's a difficult one. I don't
Yeah.
think we can
No, I think
specifically
I mean, this
do
is
this,
this is
but
a much broader issue, isn't it, as well? Because I know that, say, the charity Autistica has been doing some work on how can we just improve attitudes towards autism and neurodivergence just
mm.
within the general public. And so, yeah, I think it is a really challenging thing, and I'm hoping that we're moving in the right direction, but it does seem like there's quite a way to go still.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what is heartening from what I'm seeing within the attractions industry is that there are initiatives out there. You can see that there are
Mm,
places that are taking the first or second steps into making their spaces more applicable and more exciting for neurodivergent communities. I think you mentioned before about theatre performances. I know that ABBA Voyage have started to do Karma concerts in and around their sort of like high impact experiences during the evening time. Traffic light systems, seeing those used on
mm,
the frontage of ride systems at theme parks. I guess some that there is not a level of alignment as to what it means throughout each park. So that's something
mm,
that we need to come onto maybe as an industry in the future. But
mm,
certainly that traffic light system to go, this is intense or this is okay, is a
mm,
good start. Um, and a couple of others I thought would be really interesting to note. So, Halloween Horror Nights at Universal in the US, they've introduced a no scare necklace this year. So, if people don't want jumping out of their wits just because someone's grabbing their bodies,
mm,
then that's not going to happen. And also, another one as well, I think it comes down to what you were just saying about the attitudes of people, is Portaventura through the Sesame Street IP. They're introducing a character into their theme parks that has autism. So we're talking about, a typical Sesame Street character
mm.
that I guess it gets across to other guests that maybe don't live within the neurodivergent world or understand it to the same level, get at least a little bit of awareness about what we're trying to achieve within parks.
Yeah. No, those things all sound great, and it is great to see that those changes sort of, are being made. I think what we're very interested in is about actually really evaluating the things that are kind of already been done and see what kind of really like, because I think initiatives have been put in place, but we don't always then sort of go back and check, has this actually made neurodivergent people feel more included? So I think that's kind of, where what we want to do with this PhD project is to kind of really kind of, well, make sure that it's really based on kind of high quality evidence, but also to really make sure that we're involving people with lived experience, to really kind of help kind of together create as guidelines, hopefully, that will help change things
Fantastic.
in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Incredibly passionate project. I think across the board in terms of everyone who's involved.
Mm,
I think it's worth pointing out as well. So, for those that aren't necessarily within the neurodivergent community, it isn't just one group of people.
mm,
Autism isn't just neurodiversity.
mm,
I think it's worth noting that of the key areas, autism is one, and then obviously there's dyspraxia, dyscalculia, dyslexia, ADHD. and Tourette's. I come across conversations quite often where people get these things mixed up. It is good that people are talking about it, but maybe
Mm.
not necessarily in the right context sometimes. But it comes back down to that point again, Cassie, that there isn't a one solution fits all. We have to give guests, whether they're visiting a theatre or a theme park or a shopping centre, the ability for them to choose the experience they want. How much of an ask is
Yeah.
that? But also, how much of a desire is it from those people that are missing out?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think I mean, that's obviously something that we've got to look at with this research because there could be some kind of fairly universal things. And so
Mm,
that's what I've got another kind of research project, which is looking at kind of visual information and what people generally find comfortable or uncomfortable to look at. And in that kind of research area, it does seem to be that there are certain things that people generally find uncomfortable. So not just neurodivergent people, but more generally. And so if there are those kind of core principles, like types of lighting, which are really
mm,
uncomfortable. So if we know what those things are, then okay, it makes sense. We'll kind of apply those and hopefully it will improve things for everyone. But I think there are also these kind of very interesting potential conflicts in access needs as well that we need
mm.
to give a lot of thought.
Okay, so Kathy, based on the research that you've done, your own lived experience as a non-neurodivergent person, what have you seen in theme parks, museums, other experiences that you think there needs to be improvement, not just for the neurodivergent community, but just for guests in
Mm.
general?
Well, I think the kind of the crowding is definitely an issue in theme parks. Just thinking about when I have gone to theme parks with my family. That with my children and queuing can obviously be an issue, and that might be a hard thing to tackle. But I think from my research, it really shows that because there are so many different ways that a space can be challenging or more enabling, that there are all
Mm,
these other things that we can think about. So one of them being kind of having those recovery spaces, another being just making sure that the staff are understanding and wherever possible making things predictable. So, maybe having more previews of what the ride maybe looks like
mm.
or just being really specific about exactly what sorts of sensory information is going to be in that themed attraction.
Mm. That's really interesting because anyone that goes on YouTube and has a look, like me, at the point of view videos for coasters and rides at theme parks, there is always a lot of love on the comments section, which is like, "Thank you for sharing this. It gives me a great
Mm,
insight before I ride it myself." And obviously, those people aren't sharing whether they're neurodivergent or not. They absolutely don't need to,
mm,
but they're getting the information they need to understand what they need to build themselves up
yeah,
for the
yeah,
ride, and again,
yeah.
that's a universal thing. We should be absolutely okay with asking that information.
Absolutely, and I was just sort of thinking about myself about how when I'm watching, my husband likes to watch sort of scary, thrillers sometimes, and I find it hard to deal with that, but I like reading the spoilers and reading the synopsis in advance because then
Right.
I can deal with it because I know what's coming.
That's
But I can
brilliant.
see, more generally, I think some predictability can be helpful for lots of people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think one of the big areas that we've seen themed attractions pick up is creating quiet zones.
Mm,
Now, these, again, there's no universal language or knowledge that I can see that is being shared that creates a decent experience that varies quite greatly in terms of what is expected within a quiet zone, which I guess
mm.
comes down to the issue we were just talking about understanding what is there. How important are those quiet zones or those low level sensory zones? What are they there to actually achieve?
Yeah. Well, it definitely came out in our research that at least autistic people were saying they really needed these spaces. And even sometimes it could just be just having seating to be able to sort of, have a sit down and regulate and kind of recover from a sensory environment in maybe a sort of quiet out of the way area.
Mm,
I guess that there's, as you kind of pointed out, there's so many sort of different ways that kind of a sort of quiet or sensory room could be, because some sensory rooms are actually more about stimulating
mm,
your senses. So, there might be kind of bubble tubes or things that you can feel and touch or kind of different lightings. But that can also be very helpful to regulate for some people. Actually seeking out sensory stimulation, particularly if they can predict it and they're controlling it,
Mm,
can be really helpful. Whereas another space might just be, really it is just a very quiet space. And I think that's also an interesting one because um, I think there's a slight difference between having a quiet space and maybe a space where people can feel relaxed. And that's actually something which has come out with our work in the theatre industry, is that you have some performances which are kind of about trying to make it a quieter performance, so reducing the kind of maybe the lights and reducing the sound of the show. But there's also the kind of relaxed performance, which is basically that the audience should feel um, free to kind of act as they as they need and as they want. So you might have the audience moving around more, you might have the audience talking, and that can actually make it the opposite of quiet. So I think there are sometimes these kind of slightly different needs that don't
mm,
always, work for everyone at the same time. So I think that's also something to think about with quiet rooms, is that if someone wants to go in there and maybe stim, then it might not necessarily work for someone who wants a completely quiet space.
mm.
Yeah, so it's challenging.
Very challenging. And just thinking back to even the brainstorming sessions that some of our team have here at Catapult, there is absolutely a split in the room in terms of who wants absolute quiet and who
Mm.
hates quiet. They need the background noise, whether it's music
Yeah,
or people
yeah.
talking, or as a way to kind of not. I think it's about pressure. It's about feeling under pressure to sort
Mm.
of be quiet themselves, maybe. But even within just a small sample of people within our little company, it's amazing to see
Yeah,
how
yeah.
different things are needed by different people, which is really good. Following on from quiet zones or low level sensory rooms and experiences, the role of staff, they are the sort of the gatekeepers of the guest experience, no matter what sort of experience it is. I mean, as well as awareness, there has to be training there, hasn't there? There has to
Yeah.
be a willingness and knowledge there for people to understand exactly what's going on and what they can
Mm.
do to affect it for the better.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have designed a training for businesses actually co-produced with neurodivergent people with precisely the same. So that's called New Insight, spelled NEU for like neurodiversity insight. And that was done with Karen McLennan at Durham, now at Bath. And the reason that training is so important is that so often people in these businesses who are working there just don't understand neurodiversity, the importance of sensory environments. So the training really is to try and kind of give a kind of bit of a primer to neurodiversity and different kind of how that might affect people, and then to also think about how important the environment is and how we can potentially make that better based on our research that we've done so far.
Fantastic. Okay, so before you go, Kathy, I've got one final question for you, which is for this study, what's your one wish that you hope it'll achieve within the themed entertainment
Mm.
industry?
Yeah, so I think for me it's kind of getting beyond kind of, I don't know, tick box activities and really kind of getting some meaningful insight that's really based on evidence and really incorporates neurodivergent people's voices in shaping the guidance. And then this will mean that it's kind of in the best position to actually have, a positive effect. And it'd be great to kind of then be able to go back and kind of evaluate any changes that are made as well to see that they really do improve inclusion. And it's really great to be able to work with Catapult, because I do have got the sense from when Catapult first approached us about it. It's coming from a real place of really wanting to do the right thing, kind of really not doing it just for the sake of it, because neurodiversity is such a buzzword at the moment, and it really is about trying to really see what can be done here. And so, yeah, it's really exciting to be working with Catapult and Drayton on this, and really excited to see what Hayley, our PhD student, finds.
Likewise, cannot wait. Well, Kathy, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. And yeah, I'll see you on a theme park roller coaster soon at Drayton Manor. We'll
Yeah,
have the next podcast
absolutely.
on the front row, shall we?
Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks, Robbie.
Thank you.